Okay, hello. Today I'm Kate Mobley, and I'm going to be talking about a folktale that I wrote based in a fictional fantasy world that I have called Caranthea. Just some background to set up some of the story itself. There is a landmass in Caranthea called Astucia. It is this landmass right here. And centuries ago, early history, there was a mage called Teriel who got a bunch of other mages to join an army, fighting for her, corrupted them, and they became known as the Maleficars. And they fought against the people that lived in Astucia, the current order of things, um, and overthrew most of the land. Bunch of bad stuff to summarize, and essentially held all the power. And there was an uprising led by one of the main figures, Estros Valdares, who will be the figure of importance of this folktale. That event was called the Hollowed Uprising. So this story is about how the Hollowed Uprising ended and how victory was achieved. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Long before, in the years of darkness, evil was spread throughout the land at the hands of the Maleficars of Teriel. These mages corrupted all of Astucia with their dark power and caused the world to be devoid of hope. The Verdeum looked upon the land and saw the great evil caused by the Maleficars, and judged that they were wicked. This the gods swore to put an end to, for they loved their innocent children. They came together and deliberated, justly deciding to punish the Maleficars. They would therefore bless the people with a hero, to rise up against the dark mages and unite all of Astucia under their name. So the gods bestowed upon the mortal world a young knight by the name of Estros. He accomplished much good by an early age, and the gods showed him favor, and his heroism was known throughout all the land. One day, Golden Midar, the mightiest of all the Verdeum, spoke to Estros while he lay in deep slumber, and instructed him to travel to the land of Fae, to search for a way to defeat Teriel and the Maleficars. After saying goodbye to his wife and his most trusted friends, the scholar Reneth and the troubadour Faciris, the knight traveled to the land of Fae, whose passage was known only to a few. Here Estros arrived in the Feywild amongst sylvan creatures and scenes, unlike any the young knight had known before. There suddenly did a voice call out, its sound the same as rushing water. A stranger walks among my domain, and a mortal nonetheless. Speak quickly as to your purpose, for you tread on the land of the Fey Queen, with whom you now speak. And Estros looked upon the figure who emerged from the wood, and saw that she was Fey, with a gown made of emerald crystal. Her visage was more beautiful than the setting sun, her look altogether ethereal. The young knight bowed deeply and spoke. O ruler of this land, I am Estros, and I hold the title of knight. I have helped my people for much of my life, but for long we have been without hope. Though I am not from this land, you surely prove your rule over this domain. It is for this reason that I beseech you, queen among the Fae, to grant me the power I need to save my people from a terrible darkness. Verily I say to you, Estros of Astucia, if you can answer my 3 questions and prove that you are worthy, then I will bestow upon you a gift with which to save your people and your land. And Estros spoke clearly to the Fae, his voice carrying among the trees. Ask me your questions, great and beautiful Fae Queen, and I promise you will receive the answers you seek. The Fae Queen smiled and asked firstly, what is so delicate, more fragile than a dried leaf in winter or the web of a spider, that to simply utter its name would mean to break it? Estros pondered for a moment, then replied, though I do not confess to be a clever man, I believe the answer you seek is thus: silence. And the Fae Queen's eyes sparkled, pleased with his response. Good, but perhaps you will find more difficulty deciphering my next question. What has no way of speech on its own, but if you call out to it, you will surely receive an answer. Estros pondered again, and the man of sharp wit responded, may the gods strike me down here if this is not the answer to your question. It surely must be echo. And the Fey Queen answered, "Correct again, man of great wit. My final question. What breaks but never falls? What falls but never breaks?" And Estros, the clever man, spoke once more. "Though some might not know the answer, the solution comes to me easily. You speak of day and night." The Fey Queen smiled, pleased, and let out such twinkling laughter that even the trees around swayed and bowed. The fairy reached deeply into the folds of her robes and removed a shining object. "You claim you lack cleverness, yet you answered my questions correctly. I confess that I have heard tales of your exploits, and which have reached me here in my domain. For this I judge you to be worthy. Here I bestow upon you the sola stochais, the ever-burning flame, its power great and without comparison. With this you will be blessed with strength and the courage needed to vanquish your foes. Nor pain nor suffering shall befall your people for as long as you keep the flame alight." And the king Estros bent down to one knee in front of the Fey Queen, and placed his sword down at her feet. "I, Estros of Astucia, will keep vigil over this candle until the day I pass over into Namehal, and when that dreaded day comes, I will entrust it into the care of the next, we guardians of the flame." And the queen saw that his word was good, and helped him rise to stand before her. "Take up your sword, O mortal of virtue, and know that I have shown you favor, a promise only given to few." The Fey Queen closed her hands together and spoke the words of ancient Sylvan, and from her hands formed a wax candlestick, whose flame burned with deep verdancy, and whose light shone brightly. Estros thanked the Fey Queen for her gift and left her realm, returning to the mortal world with the sola stochais burning brightly, where Estros and his holy knights then vanquished the Maleficars and banished Teriel to the furthest reaches of the hells. From that day forward did Astucia unite and prosper at the hands of Estros Valdares, and because of his great deeds would all know the name of good King Estros, who brought light to a land of darkness. Okay, so there are quite a few things to cover. I threw in a lot in this story, but they all, I think, add together well, because there's a lot that this story implies for the people that consume it. First, the main issue is what the prime dyad is. We have chaos versus cosmos being represented by Teriel and her Maleficars, and then the cosmos being brought by Estros, which is peace and order, to Astucia. The main question to ask about this myth, because it is so ingrained in Corinthian society, is what does this reveal about Astucian culture? So the main thing, you can tell there's this kind of, the Verdeum are the pantheon of Corinthia. So there's this kind of sentiment, pro-religion sentiment, pro-Verdeum sentiment. The attitudes themselves, cultural attitudes, obviously that they revere the Verdeum, and the culture of Astucia reveres Estros to a certain point. Beliefs. There are also a few other thoughts that we can assume most of Astucia also shares. One of which, just for an example, Maleficars are bad. Seems pretty clear. There's also Fae being mysterious. That is a cultural belief and attitude that Astucians have. And then we can also look at the functional analysis of this. So what is it doing for who is sharing the text? So priests of the Verdeum are the ones who've really pushed this myth into pop culture, popular society. But it's asking what purpose? Why are they doing that? So again, we bring back to this pro-religion, pro-Verdeum sentiment. This was written very clearly from a religious perspective. There are a lot of mentions of the Verdeum, mighty, Midar, just gods, things like that are showing this sort of pro-Verdeum sentiment. When it comes to the mythemes specifically, one, we can call this story an encomium story. There's also I mean, because it's poetry of praise. It's poetry of Estros, of this grand deed that he did. Is also considered a catabasis because he travels not to an underworld, but Estros has to cross a threshold, cross a barrier, by going into the Feywild. That is not so. There's the material plane, this his normal reality, and then there's the Feywild. He had to cross that threshold to get to the Feywild. So that's why I would consider it catabasis as having that as well. There's also this big one of what the Fey Queen represents. So there's the meeting with the goddess mytheme you get out of Campbell's hero's journey, but she also stands for the guardian of the forest we saw from Enkidu and Gilgamesh and that story. And then we also have the gatekeeper. These are all kind of the same. It's essentially the same, which is what we'd find as mythemes across cultures for a lot of these, especially a lot of the aspects of Campbell's hero's journey. That symbol is the same, but she's not really. The reason I left out woman as temptress is because she's not really supposed to be a temptress. At least that's not how this specific myth has written her. Though there are certainly myths out there who give quote unquote their version of this story, and they would, in fact, paint the Fae Queen as more of a temptress figure, because again, you ask that question, what does it do for the people that are giving that story? There's another mytheme of this sort of like 3 riddles to receive a boon, or riddles or a test, 3 trials to receive a boon being the Solus Decais. Connecting that, the Solus Decais sort of stands for the Grail. It is the Grail of the Hallowed Uprising. This is while they weren't expressly searching for the Solus Decais or the Sacred Flame, it becomes this figure of something more than just a material object, just like what the Grail represented as salvation. The Solus Decais doesn't just represent this magical candle that gives them powers. It is symbolizing bringing light to the darkness, bringing cosmos to the chaos that was Teriel and the Maleficars and their hold on Astucia. Another question that I'm sure people would come up with as they're reading this is, why didn't the gods just deal with Teriel themselves? Why did they make Estros go hunt down this object? One, this presents the Fae as powerful, almost as powerful as gods. Keyword there being almost, right? Because it's a pro-religious, pro-Verdeum story. You don't want the Fae to be proven to be stronger than what the gods themselves can do. It also shows that the Fae are contactable beings, which are not what the Verdeum are. Though no one's really going to tell you that, right? Like, the priests are not going to tell you that the Verdeum, you can't actually contact them. But here there's a physical meeting with a member of the Fae, who are already these ethereal, otherworldly beings. So you can also read this and take this as, okay, well, I can actually see a Fae, this Fae Queen, but I can't see a member of the Verdeum. What does that mean? So again, there's some conclusions you can be bringing to this. It's obviously important to look at the main character of Estros. He is absolutely a culture hero for Astucia. I mean, when you get a country named after you, a kingdom named after you, there is some importance there to this culture. Now, unlike how we've defined culture heroes in the past of them not being role models because they are not really human, they express other inhuman-like qualities. Estros is a role model to, little kids who want to grow up to be knights, because they've heard stories of Estros, the knight, the king, the ruler, and his many glorious deeds since they were small. And when Estros had lived and existed and had tangible marks that he was real, and actively lived out a human life and a human experience, he can be a role model to these people because these kids can say, "Oh, I want to grow up to be just like Estros, to be as powerful as Estros." But what makes him separate from that is that there's still those inhuman-like qualities that he essentially met with Fae, had a funny magic candle that not everyone has, which the stories of the powers that he was given and the things that he had done during the Hollowed Uprising, they're not quite real, not quite myth. So it's that line that culture heroes often skate. And again, he lived out the Prime Dyad. He brought order to chaos. He brought cosmos to chaos. He brought physically the Solus Decais back to Astucia, but metaphorically brought light to a land of darkness. He also experienced apotheosis. He becomes a godlike being for those that either heard of his exploits in the midst of the Hallowed Uprising or later on, knowing that this man, give or take two other people, overthrew the crippling, overpowered beings that were Teriel and the Maleficars. Another big thing that I want to point out is kind of connected with this, what is this doing for the people that are reading it or giving it, providing this story, is the portrayal of Estros in this story. As you can tell by the art that I've attached, he is a warrior, he is a king, he is a hero, a fighter, a knight. But this story does not portray him as that, as a hardened warrior, or as a capable leader in battle, even though he is. Why? Why doesn't this story portray him like that? Well, because the focus of this story is showing that he is a devout, clever, religiously tied man, young man. So, as a consumer of this story, you're not getting out of it that, oh, Estros is the strongest guy around. He can vanquish anyone in battle. There's only one mention of him even taking out a sword, and that's to put it at the feet of the Fae Queen and bow to her. There's no violence except vague mentions of what happens after he gets the Solus Decais. What the story is about is that he's smart enough to answer her questions, he's clever enough to answer her questions, her riddles, and that he was a gift from the gods. And those are the two main takeaways that people are essentially hoping that people take out of this story, is that he's devout, a gift from the Verdeum. So really it's the Verdeum who saved everyone because they gifted everyone Estros, and that Estros was a very clever and smart man. So those are really the takeaways that a consumer of this story would be getting, or at least be getting directed to analyze. And that's essentially the big picture of what this story is doing for the people that are reading it. So, thank you.